There's a truth about trail running, something most people won't understand. The gear is nothing without the runner. The shoes, the gear, it's all just a shell. It's the legs, the grit, the mind that makes it work. I've been doing this for years, long enough to know the grind, and long enough to let it become a part of me. Some might call it ego. I just call it being honest about who I am. I posted it, like I always do, a picture of my gear, my shoes, my blue Brooks hat that's become a lucky charm. I snapped the photo from just the right angle, the kind of shot that screams, I'm at the top of my game. A quick caption to match. I knew the likes would flood in. It wasn't bragging if it was true, right? But there's a different kind of obsession in ultra running. It's not just about speed or endurance. It's about proving you're made of something other people aren't. Pushing through pain, through isolation, through the wild, just to say you did it. It's a cult in its own way. The kinds of posts I shared, the grind, the photos, they're proof of a life I've committed to. It's everything I've ever wanted. But sometimes it feels like it's not enough. And then I saw her. She appeared on the trail, a glimpse of a figure in the distance, a woman, moving like she was floating, like she wasn't even touching the earth. Her pace was inhuman, as if the trail itself was her playground. I caught flashes of her, the pink hat bouncing through the trees. Every time I thought I was getting closer, she vanished again. Weeks went by like this. I couldn't stop searching for her. I'd go out on the trails at odd hours, parking at different trailheads, pushing myself harder than ever. My body began to break down. My times started to suffer, but I couldn't help it. I was obsessed. She haunted my thoughts, always just out of reach. Then, one morning, I saw her again. This time, she wasn't some phantom in the distance. She was right there. She stopped, waved at me, and vanished again. I was so close, I could feel it. I knew the trails like the back of my hand, and I wasn't about to let her slip away. I ran harder, faster, my pulse in my throat. The woods felt different, the air thicker. The darkness seemed to creep in faster. The bare branches of the trees reached out like skeletal hands. And the crows, those damn crows, were watching me again. When I finally reached the spot where she had been, the realization hit me like a blow to the chest. It wasn't her. Not anymore. What I saw hanging in the tree wasn't a runner. It was a corpse, a decayed, twisted body tangled in the branches of an old oak. The bright pink hat, once so vivid, was now dull, half covered in dirt. Her clothes were shredded, and her limbs, twisted and lifeless, barely held on to the skeletal frame. She had been there for a long time. Her body was part of the forest now. The only thing that moved was her hair, gently swaying in the wind. I backed away, my breath ragged. How long had she been here? How long had I been chasing nothing? The trail, the forest, they weren't what I thought they were. I ran back to my truck, my heart racing, and as I started to drive away, something felt off. The woods behind me no longer seemed familiar. The path twisted in on itself. The trees were closer now, the trail impossible to follow, and no matter where I went, I saw her again, her body hanging in the tree, swaying with the wind. I couldn't escape it. The forest was messing with my mind. The trail didn't end. It just looped back on itself. And then I posted the last update. A blurry, frantic picture of me, huddled in a clearing, grasping at my phone. I've been running forever. No end. She's still here. I'm still here. And then I disappeared into the woods. I woke up in the forest. It wasn't the calm I expected. It wasn't peace or clarity. No, it was an eerie quiet, a silence so thick it almost pressed against my chest. I didn't understand how I'd gotten there, or why I was naked, sprawled across the cold earth. The last thing I remembered was running, chasing the phantom runner. And then, nothing, just blank space. The crows were watching again, their dark forms perched in the trees above, those beady eyes fixed on me, like they were waiting for something. I sat up, but my limbs felt like stone. My head spun, and the bitter chill of the air hit me all at once. I glanced around. The forest hadn't changed. It still looked the same. The trees, the dirt, the endless path stretching ahead. It felt familiar, too familiar. And then I saw it. My clothes, hanging from a branch, carefully draped like someone had placed them there. My shorts, shirt, socks, even my blue Brooks hat, perched on a branch just out of reach, mocking me. I laughed, though it felt hollow. I had no idea what was happening. Maybe I'd passed out. Maybe someone had found me and thought it would be funny to mess with me. Ultra running is a strange world, and sometimes the lines blur between what's real and what's just a product of your mind. I dressed quickly, the fabric cold and uncomfortable against my skin. I wasn't scared. I couldn't afford to be. I needed to keep moving. Back home, things were off. My feed was blowing up. My Instagram was filled with posts. My own face, my gear, the trails. But something was wrong. I didn't remember posting half of it. The photos were strange, distorted. There were captions that sounded like me, but not quite. I felt like I was being watched. I didn't want to think about it too much. I had races to run. I had goals. The life of an ultra runner was about pushing through the pain, the fatigue, the doubts. So, I got back out there, back on the trails. That's when I met Jenna. She was new, eager, the kind of runner who looked at me like I was some kind of trail-running god. It was flattering, sure. Maybe I could mentor her, teach her the ropes, and maybe, just maybe, it would give me some purpose again. Maybe it would keep the thoughts about the woman, the corpse in the tree, out of my mind. We ran together, and she hung on every word I said. Pacing, hydration, mental toughness. She listened, like I had all the answers. But I didn't tell her about the forest. I didn't tell her about the things I had seen. There was no need to scare her off. Then, one day, we were deep in the woods, when Jenna stopped in her tracks. "Do you see that?" she asked, voice trembling. Her finger pointed forward, and I followed it. There, in the distance, was the woman. But she wasn't the same. The woman in the tree was back, but she looked worse. Decayed, her limbs hanging awkwardly, her body wrapped in vines, moss growing over her clothes like nature had claimed her. Her pink hat was barely visible under the layers of grime. Jenna screamed, "What the hell is that, Kip?" I tried to calm her down. "It's nothing. Just a trick of the light. The forest plays tricks on you." But Jenna wasn't convinced. She turned and ran, her footsteps crashing through the brush. "Jenna, wait!" I shouted. But she didn't stop. I chased after her. But the forest was changing. The trail twisted, turned in on itself. I couldn't catch up. The trees loomed closer, their branches stretching like fingers, reaching for me. The crows circled above, their caws filling the air, like a dark symphony. The forest was alive, and it was playing with me. Finally, I found her. She was huddled in a clearing, hands over her face. I approached cautiously. "Jenna, it's okay. You panicked, that's all." Happens to everyone out here. She didn't respond. Jenna, her head snapped up, and I froze. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, but she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me. I turned, and there I was, my body hanging from a tree, tangled in vines. My face was there, the same blue Brooks hat, but it wasn't me. It couldn't be. I was standing right there. But the longer I looked, the more I realized it was me. The body in the tree was mine. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't imagining things. I was hanging there, lifeless, as if I had always been there. The wind picked up, and the crows screeched louder. Jenna bolted, running away, but I didn't follow. I couldn't. I was already part of it. The forest had claimed me, and the trail, it never ends. How do you feel now? Do you think you could outrun the forest? Or would it eventually swallow you whole?